Hey, how's it going? Welcome to Enhancing the Human Experience, the podcast where we talk about anything and everything related to helping you consciously create and live your best life. In today's episode, it's all about what do you know? Like questioning the biggest authority of all, and that is ourselves. Because what we know either propels us toward our goal and our dream and our vision for our life, or it holds us back, and it's like an invisible barrier. So I'm super excited to get into this topic. The idea for this topic, the impetus came this week as I'm like purging. Do you ever do this? Purge your stuff, clear out that old energy so you can allow some new energy to flow into your life. And I'm going through the whole house, gathering up stuff that I haven't used in years, or that's just, clutter and junk. That kind of stuff just accumulates, doesn't it? Kind of looked like that analogy of weeding the garden. Those weeds are going to grow in our garden, in our consciousness, and it's like we got to get those things out of there, that clutter, that junk, so we can streamline it, so we can clean it up, make it pure again, purify it, and get those new ideas flowing again. Because I thought about this notion of this game of life, and it's this idea that no matter what level you're at, there's another level for you. That's why if you're playing at a super high level, if you have the financial success or an abundance of financial success, relationship success, health success, there's still levels for you. That's why it's like this infinite game. A couple episodes ago, I talked about the movie Ready Player One, where it's a virtual universe and there's just continual levels of, you beat the level, you move up. You beat that level, you move up. So for all of us, there's never a point in time when we're going to be like totally arrived at the end of the game. And when we look at what we know, that's like the driving mechanism or the paradigm that we have to operate at that level. Like knowing is the supreme. There's this sequence of hoping something is the way you want it to be, believing something is the way you want it to be, and finally knowing is like the bedrock, the foundation, the supreme, way to look at the world, or the supreme program that we have to get in and operate on and change in order to go up in those levels. And of course, what we know on the inside will manifest on the outside, and what we know to be true about ourselves will become our experience and will actually become our reality given time. It's the seeds we plant. And so I've talked about believing before, and you all know this. Your beliefs create your reality, the great famous quote that William James talked about. And my other one is, it's a Latin proverb, and it said that belief creates the actual fact, or believing you have it allows you to have it. Right? That's the Latin proverb. I get those two mixed up, William James and that Latin proverb, but we all know about belief. But I think something that we don't often think about is what we know, because knowing trumps belief. I know that's a big statement to make because we're so ingrained with belief. Tony Robbins talks about the power of belief. All the gurus talk about the power of belief, and they still talk about the knowing, but I don't think they talk about it as much. And that's why I wanted to share it again with you in this episode of the podcast. Of course, the title is, So What Do You Know? And you're questioning the biggest authority of all. Because a lot of times people think, well, the authority is your parents or your family or the government or the educational system, but it's really not, because we're the biggest authority. And the thing about knowing that can be so deceptive is that once something known gets into your consciousness and becomes part of your paradigm for the world, it becomes invisible, doesn't it? And until you go in there and clean it out, like you do a purge, like I was just talking about, and start rooting around in there and uncover, maybe you open up a box that you haven't opened up in years, maybe even since you were a small child, and in there is a piece of knowledge that you've adopted to be known. I'm not going to say adopted to be true, because that knowing trumps truth, or knowing is truth for us. But if it's buried in some stack of boxes way back in your consciousness at the deepest level, it's going to be very difficult to find it unless you go searching for it, right? Unless you're constantly in there rooting around, which is back to this garden metaphor and back to this clearing out the clutter metaphor, if we don't get into that garden and move plants and look behind stuff, there could be weeds growing in there that are hindering our growth and our ability to create the experiences we want to have in the world, because what we know becomes manifest. And so in this episode, I'm really excited to talk about this and answer that question, or have you ask yourself that question: what do I know that is holding me back from creating more of what I want in life? Now, a while ago, I talked about on the podcast this notion that you can know something, that you can instill a knowing in yourself that will help you get what you want. Here we're looking at it from a little bit of different angle. We're looking at things that you know that are holding you back, that need to be removed or upgraded in your mind. And I want to weave in this other thing because I don't think it would do you justice and service if I didn't say this. I kind of look at knowing as two things. We are body, mind, and soul. We're intellectual beings, but we're also spiritual beings, and we have that soul wisdom, that higher knowledge within us, that inner knowing, the knowing that transcends the intellectual mind. And so what I want to say, and just briefly here, is that when you think about knowing, I would always think about that inner wisdom, that inner knowing that's going to transcend any carnal knowledge or race knowledge that you've inherited from your family or the education system or the world. Anything that came through as that type of knowledge may be suspect. I'm not going to say it is or it isn't, but whatever is in our soul and our higher self, the little voice within yourself that speaks to you and guides you through your life, that's never suspect. And so one of the problems that I think we can run into in the world is once something gets planted into our consciousness as a known, as something we know, through the education system, through your family, through something you've read in a book, through some way that you've gotten it in, through maybe another human being, living in race mind, race consciousness, not a bad thing, but I would definitely question that and hold it up to scrutiny a lot more than I would question something that came from your heart, from your inner being, from your higher self. You kind of see what I'm saying? So I have to say that because I think there's kind of two knowns. There's intellectual known, where we learn something, books, other person, whatever. That's kind of suspect. But the higher self known, I don't think is ever suspect. And so I like to make that distinction. And I know that's sometimes challenging in our world because we're, once that known gets in there, it's known, right? Whether you learned it in the education system, whether you learned it wherever, known is known. Doesn't matter how it gets in there, but always, I think, go back to that inner voice, inner wisdom, intuition. That's why I think we've always got to practice cultivating that intuition. Okay, that's my piece on the two aspects of known. The other thing I want to say is that this knowing, one of my favorite persons who's talked about this knowing is Jitta Krishnamurti. And he has a book, Freedom from the Known. I'm going to snap a picture, a quote, maybe a couple quotes of it and put them up on my Instagram page at gmarkphillips. But to be honest, a lot of his stuff, when I read his stuff years ago, I didn't quite get it at the time, and this same thing happened when I read Eckhart Tolle, The Power of Now. I didn't feel that I fully understood it, and so that's with this idea of you kind of have to go back all the time and re-familiarize yourself or reread things, because our level of understanding is always changing, our consciousness is always evolving, and so we maybe get a new understanding when we go visit something later. But the reason I bring up Krishnamurti is because of his book, Freedom from the Known. And what he's talking about is that what you know can be a prison. And that's kind of the heart of this episode of the podcast, asking yourself, what do I know that is holding me back from realizing something in my life that I want, or from leveling up? Remember, we're all on this continuum, and no matter where you're at, if you feel you're at the very bottom, if your life has totally crashed and you're rebuilding every aspect of your life, then you're on the continuum, right? You're in the game. We're all in the game. But if you're playing at a high level, and many people are playing at a high level, and I learn so much from these people, they can still go higher, and they will need to go higher. Our experiences in life, the results we're having in any area of our life, are always a reflection of how much we're growing and how much we're understanding ourselves, knowing ourselves, and then finding a way to deliver that into the world to bring value to other people so that we're beneficial to them, so that we, entertain them, help them, whatever they determine to be as valuable. That's how we grow in the world too, right? It's like the sharing of value. And so his stuff is really, really good because he goes deep into it, deeper than I really can wrap my mind around. I mean, he was a spiritual genius, like a spiritual dynamo. And his stuff talks about this freedom from the known, whether it's religious known or intellectual known. It can hold you back and keep you from growing as a human being, right? As a spiritual being, because it puts you in an invisible prison, for lack of a better words. And a lot of people have talked about this, but I think it's really so important because a lot of the time, and this has been true in my own experience at different points in time, is that what you know really can hold you back. And the most important kind of knowing is what you know about yourself, like what type of person you are, because that not only is knowing the bedrock, but when you combine knowing with your identity and with your self-concept, then you've got either a really awesome tool or a really awesome cage or a prison that can keep you stuck. Because until we change that core identity and that core self-concept, what we know to be true about ourselves, nothing can change for us. And the quote of the week, if you're not familiar with the quote of the week, every week I pull a quote from the podcast, either something that one of my guests has said or something that relates to what we're talking about in this episode of the podcast. And in this episode, I pulled a quote from Dennis Waitley. Of course, Dennis Waitley was the really famous kind of sports psychologist. Like, he wrote the book, The Psychology of Winning, and he has a lot of other stuff, super, super big and influential. And he said this. He said, "It's not what you are that holds you back. It's what you think you are not." It's not what you are that holds you back. It's what you think you are not. That really sums up what we're talking about here, because again, we're combining the knowing with who we are and what we are. Now, the only thing that I would change here, if I may be so bold, is to change the word think to know. So it's not what you are that holds you back. It's what you know you are not. I really think we have to go all the way to the known, because remember, there's hoping, there's thinking, there's believing, and there's knowing. I think that's the sequence of like dialing it in or diving deeper to getting at the real ideas that form our lives and form the bedrock of our lives that everything springs from. Hoping, thinking, or maybe it's even thinking, hoping, believing, knowing. But I know, I know that knowing is the foundation, is the deepest level. So if we get to the knowing, we've done it, even after the believing. So, Dennis Waitley's quote is, I think, really apt for today's episode of getting to this notion of knowing. So I guess that's what I offer you today is, just maybe think about this. What do you know to be true about yourself or about the world or about your business or your life that is holding you back in an invisible prison? And sometimes it can be a little bit challenging to get in there and get to the knowing because, like I said, they're hidden deep and deep and deep into the deepest recesses of our subconscious storage. And sometimes to get them out, we have to do a little spring cleaning or like fall cleaning in this case. But what do you know about yourself that is holding you back from getting to those new levels? And like I said, everyone has another level to go to. And so this isn't just for people in the middle or people who perceive themselves to be at the bottom, or even people at the top who are already accustomed to this notion that looking within themselves and changing who they are and changing their beliefs and their knowing will help them get to the new levels. We can all do it. What do you know about yourself that is holding you back from getting to that new level? Before we wrap up, I just want to share one of the tools, and this is actually a free tool that is available to you on my website, gmarkphillips.com. And this is the tool called Renew Morning Ritual. And like I said, you can pick it up free. You sign up to my mailing list and you'll instantly get it into your inbox. And what this is one page. Well, it's actually a little over one page. It's like 1.25 page. But it's a super simple morning ritual that you can go through very quickly to help you clarify, focus, and align with the things and experiences you want to have in life. What I did, like I do with all of the tools that I create, is kind of gather everything up and all the knowledge, and it, here's a hint, it all comes back to this self-concept and self-identity for the most part, being the bedrock, and everything springs from that. But Renew Morning Ritual goes through 5 steps, and you can go through them very quickly, that will help you reconnect with who you are and reconnect with the source that you came from. Like, there's only one source and everything springs from it in the universe. Reconnect with that source, reconnect with who you are, what you want, why you want it, because remember that our why is like our jet fuel, isn't it? That's the fuel that's going to propel us toward what we want. And then also, it will help you start thinking about how you're going to get it. And this is all about connecting with the inspired action, not just the things that everyone else is doing that is working for them, that you say, well, if it worked for them, it's going to work for me. Your path, just like my path, is a unique path, right? And so that knowledge only comes from, guess where? Inside of ourselves, right? That little voice we talked about, the inner wisdom, inner knowing. So there, it touches on that too. But I find it to be a really simple, effective tool that you can use to get more of what you want in life. Use it every day. It's like, basically, it's like tuning into who you are, what you want, why you want it, and how you can get it. Because we know that life is a vibrational game. And when we tune into all those things, align ourselves with all those things being, right? We're going to win. And by win, I mean we're going to move to the next level. We're going to show up in our best possible way, express ourselves in a way that is most happy and most joyous and fun for ourselves, but also helpful to other people, right? Because it's like becomes this win-win. So Renew Morning Ritual is available on my website, gmarkphillips.com. You can pick it up by subscribing to my mailing list, and you'll also get all of these podcasts will be, a notification will be sent to your inbox. And as new products come online, I've got a couple of new products in the works that I'll be introducing hopefully very soon here. You'll get access to that stuff too. And before we close, I want to share one last thing with you, just as a reminder. Sometimes I feel I need to do this to remind myself and also to remind you, listeners, what the purpose of this podcast is. Enhancing Human Experience was the podcast that I wanted to create to share the knowledge and wisdom that isn't generally available in the mainstream, right? This is kind of all the stuff that we should know or we should be taught. And I feel really fortunate and really happy to share this knowledge with you. Now, are there other people sharing this knowledge? Absolutely. I'm just one of the voices out there that is really passionate about sharing this spiritual and metaphysical knowledge that transcends our race knowledge, right? That's valuable too. But for the most part, one of the impetuses for creating the podcast is that it's my feeling that there is plenty of that knowledge out there. There's plenty of, reading, writing, and arithmetic, and learning the history and learning about sociology and geology. That's all good. There's plenty of that out there. My passion, and where I think there is a huge amount of value and kind of a void in the world, is sharing spiritual and metaphysical knowledge. Now, sometimes I have people on the podcast that talk about business or life in general or share experiences and other things. And you know what? That is encompassed in the podcast as well. But really, the heart of it is sharing best practices for living. And yes, a lot of those best practices, at least when I'm doing the podcast by myself and I don't have a guest, they center around sharing the spiritual, metaphysical knowledge, I call it this bedrock knowledge, and ideas that I've encountered in my life that have really, really helped me and that I feel will help you as well. And I think it's, again, just talking more about this stuff, reminding ourselves who and what we are, reminding ourselves we live in an energetic world. We're spiritual beings having a human experience, like Pierre Desjardins talked about. That's really the heart of the podcast. So I think from time to time, it's important to remind you of that, remind myself of that, kind of refocus. But we still talk about well-being, health and nutrition, entrepreneurialism, business, prosperity, abundance. All those things go as well. But we also talk about the metaphysical side too. So that's kind of the purpose of the podcast. This is my passion to study this stuff. I've realized a lot of benefit in my own life. I've seen other people realize benefit when they transcend kind of the stuff they've known and the stuff they've learned that has kind of held them back, or they've identified with certain things. When we transcend the known side of ourselves, the like intellectual side. We get to the spiritual, pure side, and then we can operate really freely in the world. We don't have any hindrances holding us back. This is where all sorts of, if you've ever done any type of spiritual work or meditation or yoga type practices, anything like that, I mean, the whole goal is to reconnect you with the divine, with the source that's outside of ourselves. That's where all of our goodness comes from. If we connect ourselves with something that was made in the material world and came through race mind or came through intellectual mind, it's not really fully connected with that deeper side. And so that's how the whole goal is to have our consciousness and have our mind transcend where we're at now and the level of consciousness we have and go back to that pure place. This is kind of the idea behind the book of quotes I created called Boundless Joy. The joy is always within us, but we need to connect with it on a continual basis to let it kind of cleanse our consciousness and purify ourselves. That's kind of the whole goal of any spiritual practice, is purification, washing away all the things that aren't aligned with divinity and aren't aligned with our true immortal self and our spiritual self, and kind of reconnecting that. And I think that's why spiritual practice is needing to be done on a daily basis, just like we need to wash and brush our teeth on a daily basis. We really need to connect spiritually with who we really are on a daily basis. And I find that's when things start to tune up, right? I've talked about this before. When I started practicing meditation, a lot of things that weren't working in my life, a lot of things that weren't working in my life fixed themselves, because I believe that meditation allowed me to transcend the consciousness that was creating that. And I didn't even really do anything other than transcend that, and those things fall away on their own. I think it's like a magic elixir, quite frankly. Any type of connection activity that you do that connects you with the source of who you are and the divinity within you washes and purifies your consciousness and your soul, your whole being. Boom. Then you have arrived, right? Then you have you show up new in the world, you express yourself differently. Once the consciousness is cleaned, it's like you can't go there anymore. That doesn't happen. The reality that you were creating, or the situations or circumstances you were creating from that level of consciousness, don't happen anymore. That's why I say it's like magic. So that's a little bit of a reminder about the purpose of the podcast and why I'm so passionate about sharing this stuff. And just want to say this, the reason I focus on human beings is that human beings really affect in the biggest way all of the planet, right? I'm not saying that we don't need to enhance animals' experiences or the environment's experiences, but when we enhance our own experience and when we connect with our higher selves and our higher wisdom, all of those other things are going to fix themselves, because who's the biggest player and who has the most power to make an impact in the world? Human beings, right? So if we be really selfish and focus on fixing ourselves first, that will in turn indirectly fix the world, fix relationships, fix systems, right? All systems emanate from human beings. And so when we make systems and processes and anything that we create in the world, any type of entity or structure or organization, whether it's a business, government, educational system, whatever, when we fix ourselves, those things automatically become aligned with divinity as well. But we can't align those things with divinity unless we're aligned with divinity. Everything we create is a manifestation of us. If we're doing it from limited consciousness, from race consciousness or mortal mind, guess what? It's just not going to be the best version that it could be, whether it's a business, educational system, governmental system. So that's why all of us have a duty and like an obligation, and it's a selfish thing. If we want the world to be better, we have to be better. We all know this, right? This is common knowledge, but sometimes, let's be honest, it can be challenging to do inner work, right? It's sometimes not very fun. It is definitely not easy work, and it's something we have to show up every day. And again, back to those levels, So anyway, that's a little bit of a reminder of what the purpose of the podcast is. When we get better, the world gets better, our experiences get better, and it like emanates from each and every one of us. So that's why I'm so passionate about sharing this stuff on the podcast. All right, I think we're going to wrap it up there. Again, just to remind you, what do you know that is holding you back from creating the experiences you want to have in life, in any area of your life? I think it's a really powerful question. All right. Hey, thanks you so much for listening to the podcast today. I really do appreciate it. Go pick up Renew Morning Ritual at gmarkphillips.com. And if you haven't subscribed to my YouTube channel, go do that. youtube.com/gmarkphillips. You can find all of these podcasts and my vlogs and different products that I'm creating on at that YouTube channel. And until next time, have an awesome week. And I wish you all the best health, wealth, and success. Bye-bye.